When I left Mormonism and I stepped away from my whole entire crazy MAGA community, I lost my parents. I lost all my family. I was living in the middle of this huge community still, and everybody just ghosted me. Danielle, I got a call like a week after I left the church, and I told everyone, I'm leaving the church. This is BS. I was 44 years old. I got a call from my son, Brody, who was 9 years old at the time, his carpool from one of the little Mormon mommies. And she's like, hey, we don't need you in the carpool anymore. I'm like, I need to be in the carpool because I have to have my kid taken to school 4 days a week. I'm driving that one day so I can work and stuff. She's like, we just don't want you in anymore. And that was it. And then she blocked me. She was a friend of mine for 20 years. I've never heard from her again. I'm called by Take Two on social media because as everything came collapsing down around me, I attempted to take my life. I was saved by a neighbor girl that changed my mind. I'm here today as a survivor of trying to unalive myself because when everything collapsed, I couldn't even figure out which way was up. And I had this feeling of, oh, yay, now I'm free from Mormonism. No, I walked up, there's no God. And that 24 years that I spent with this monster because I thought I was married for time and all eternity in the temple. Oh, that wasn't real. I was with them for nothing. And nothing made sense anymore. And I was lost and shunned by my community. So that literally drove me. And I've spoken to so many other people who, once they have that chink and they walk away, they go into this nihilistic void and self-harm is a result of that for some people. But then I was to other cults. So I go right into this hardcore Christian organization. I spent 4.5 years there and I was still deeply enmeshed in MAGA. And it's funny because I was finding every cult that there was until I got your book Uncultured, started following you, worked with Linda Corbin, her book Recovering Agency, and actually did some of the Stephen Hostin's cult deprogramming stuff and found a really good counselor. And it wasn't until that therapy that I was able to recognize cult tactics and finally free myself.
And that is super important because that, I think, people who haven't been in cults don't understand that, like, you can leave the cult, but you're still looking for that level of community. You're still looking for that level of certainty. You're still looking for that level of reception of control over your life. And it takes us deconstructing and healing and being able to name those things. Like, it takes time. So I always say, like, I have this 3-part model of deconstruction. You have the crack in the brainwashing, and you physically and mentally leave the cult.
Yep.
Then you have a decade of deconstruction, which starts when you start it. Some of us like run for 10 years first. Then you have the decade of deconstruction. And then you have moving forward with no models and new models. But in that entire period between when you left the cults and when you kind of get, I would say, like over the hill of the decade of deconstruction, you're super vulnerable to joining new cults.
Next week.
Because you literally have so many voids, right? Like, one of the things about high control groups is they give you a framework for how to do life, right? That is the promise of every high control group is if you do this, you follow our way. Exactly. It's the way. And we promise you that, like, you will win at life. And so when you lose that framework, you really feel like you are just floundering in the middle of nowhere. And that is especially true for us cult babies who never knew anything but the high control environment. So without thinking about it, we're looking for that next high control. So even like I look back, I wrote a book about the army being my next big cult that I joined. But like in reality, in high school and college, I put myself into such a high control environment. I was working 2 to 4 jobs. I was making straight A's. I was going to be valedictorian. I truly believe if I hadn't fallen into a crazy relationship and gone into the army, like I would have had a PhD by the age of 25 because I would have just let that system control me and give me the constant work and the constant striving and the next step and the next way to be because I didn't truly understand how to just be in the world. And
of your life being controlled.
and so for me, the army felt comfortable. Like, honestly, when I looked forward to joining basic training, I was like, I just think of it as just like falling forward into the hard embrace of high control. And so then it's not until I'm 28 years old, getting out of the army, new baby, all of this stuff that I actually start to realize, oh, I have no way of knowing how to be in the world. And kind of what you said, we bounce into all these groups and then hopefully start to figure out deconstruction. And then I just had to write the book and figure it out because I couldn't just read the book.
It's funny, I turned my Christian church into a cult when it wasn't actually that culty. So, like, I would go talk to my pastor. I remember, like, a couple months after leaving Mormonism, I was 44 years old and deeply brainwashed. So then I joined this Christian church and I make an appointment. I call the office at this mega church. They have, like, I don't know, 30,000 people between 7 campuses. And I'm like, I need to sit down with the pastor so I can meet him and get to know him. And then I had questions about, like, what do you think I should do about my divorce? And what do you think I should do about my ex-husband? And can you pray about this with me? And he's like, it's not my job to give you advice and stuff. Like, what's this conversation about? I was trying to turn my mega church into the Mormon church because I felt lost when, like, what did I actually need to do? If you were going to sum up in a nutshell, if people have friends and family that are coming out of the mega thing right now, if they're falling out of, a lot of people are leaving their churches right now, leaving religions, leaving whatever,
Yeah.
bring themselves there. Like,
So,
if you were a person or you have friends that are that person, then what?
so this is the important thing about what you just described. And I learned this about myself as well, that like you were looking for a guide, you were looking for a guru, right? And that is one of the things we have to help people realize that they don't need in a way, right? So, first of all, like it's really, really hard to engineer a crack in the brainwashing. And I believe that's because we buy into our own indoctrination as teenagers or adults. Like we buy into our own indoctrination, much like domestic violence, like until somebody's ready to go, like they're not ready. But once that crack in the brainwashing happens, right? And that can happen again, like people don't have to agree for the crack in the brainwashing, right? And I think this has been for a lot of people, then cracks are really good at letting the light in. So one of the things that I encourage is just like, just have those conversations, just engage with those people again that maybe you've stopped talking to because there was no point. Like there's a point again. And like ask them questions, ask them why they believe what they believe, ask them why this time's different, and just ask them a lot of questions. But something to realize kind of bigger to what you talked about is they're going to be coming out of this dazed and confused.
Right.
They're going to be coming out of this going, what the F did I just give the last 10 years of my life to? Right.
Well, not
It,
running away from MAGA or from whatever it is, their ultra conservative lives. And I have so many people that are waking up. I'm sure that you're seeing this across your platforms too. Of course, there's a lot of people that are just, on the other side, like, hi, we've been over here being these moderates, or I'm an atheist or whatever, and I wasn't part of this movement. But I have a lot of people like myself who are leaving religions, leaving MAGA, and just in general, letting go of some of their really strongly right-wing ideologies, but they're not running away like, "We look at us now, we're free." That is almost never the reaction. They are going, "Oh my God, what just happened to me?" And I think that it's a really vulnerable, really perilous time. And like you say, they're either going to go back to their other cult, they're going to find a new cult, they're going to go into existential crisis and not want to be here anymore. So the question that I'm getting from a lot of people who weren't part of like this conservative movement or the Trumpsters or whatever, they're saying, what do I do with my friends and family who are starting to show that their shelf is breaking, that they have these chinks? And I want to hear what you would say. What would you tell somebody who their friends or family have left or they're leaving? My only advice is if somebody had told me when I was a Mormon and then I left that I was, the bad dog, like, look at you, you pooped on the floor and then smacked me with the newspaper. If someone had tried to make me feel guilty, I may have gone running back to the Mormon church because those
yeah.
people would have embraced me and
Yeah.
took it right back. But I think beating people up for being part of this is not the way to do it. But like, what is?
Yeah. It's kind of like, I say cults in a lot of ways to prisons. And we know that from the outside, right? We know that like when you're in a high control group, you don't have freedom. And then once you get out, you're released back to freedom again, right? But the people that are in the cults don't realize it that way, right? It's not, oh, I'm so glad I had my freedom, right? Like you need the deconstruction for that. It's this thing that I totally believed in just fell apart,
Right? It plunges you into
you
chaos.
know? So it's like one of the ways I would say to treat them is like imagine that your son or daughter or somebody you really love went off to join the military, very proud of themselves, very hopeful, and then came back because they had failed out. You know, like, how are you going to treat them? Hopefully, you're going to treat them kindly, right? You're going to understand that they're disappointed, whether you approved of this or not, right? Like, if my daughter wanted to join the military, I would do everything to make her not do it. But then, if that was her decision, of course, I'm going to support her. If she came home broken, the last thing I should say is, girlfriend, I told you, right? Like, I told you this was bad. I told you they were going to hurt you. Right? It's like we have to have some compassion and understand that whether I agreed with that or not, that was her plan for her life. And she went off to go do that. And now it's just completely fallen apart. And so it's like we need to have compassion. We don't have to forgive. And I think that's very different, right? And I think toxic forgiveness is pushed all the time. But there needs to be some level of compassion. And I want to tell my Larry King live story that I told in the Epstein video, if that's okay with you.
Yes, so good.
So in 1993, this man goes on Larry King Live to talk about the children of God. And he was up in the leadership, and he specifically explains how one of the worst things was that he was forced to he says, have relations with a 10-year-old girl who was the daughter of one of the leaders, right? And he says this, and he really, really thinks he's going to be able to explain cult control. He really thinks he's going to be able to get Larry and the audience to understand that he was under control, and he now thinks this is horrible, right? And I think he needed one word of compassion. But what he got was Larry King said, and you did it. And shortly thereafter, this man took his life. And I really like to say, like, I'm not in any way excusing this. The 10-year-old girl was my mother. But when people are coming out of control, right, all adults in cults are perpetrators, right? So every single one of them, whether they realize it or not, has been part of perpetrating the cult abuses on themselves, on other people, definitely on the children.
I was a moral monster. I was hateful and judgmental.
But if someone had called you that when you were just coming out, right? Like, imagine what that would have done. And so one of the reasons that people go back to cults is because they can't fit into the world. I would be willing to bet that if there's ever been a study done on why people join the military for the second time, it's because they can't
reintegrate,
fit in anywhere, and they can't find those things. They haven't deconstructed, so they don't realize like what they need. You know, for me, I realized I was jonesing for a mission for a long time, and not like in a healthy way kind of a mission. And so deconstructing those pieces is going to work. And I know that we are all disgusted with MAGA, right? And I know that we see it for what it is, that it is homophobic, that it is racist, that it is harmful, that it is selfish, that, all of those things. But when people are coming out of the cult, it's like every person gets to decide how they're going to treat those people. But what you don't get to decide is that if they can't find acceptance and understanding,
you're back to the cult.
They're going to go back to that cult. They're going to go back to another cult, or they're going to end up in some version of severe trauma behavior, which is often ultimately can be taking your life, but otherwise very heavily medicating. And just sort of the bad stuff, right? So where I completely understand that people are validly so angry that there has been so much damage done. There has been lives lost. We are going to spend generations trying to put back what he's broken, right? So I'm not justifying any of the harm, right? Culture, organized crime, like bad stuff has happened. However,
but if your grandma, your boyfriend, somebody is stepping away from this right now as the ship is all sinking and they're trying to find that life raft to cling on to, we can't beat them over the head and tell them bad dog.
Right.
We just can't. Right. I think it was so helpful for me leaving Mormonism that I had my ex-Mormon TikTok community. So I had other people who were also coming out and we could deconstruct together, and people like you who are the experts at it, who were just the safe haven to help me deconstruct the things that I had done that were just really ugly, bad behaviors that, I mean, I have so much regret. I always feel like everything that I do on social media is to apologize for Mormon me.
And what I want to say to people is like, I promise you the shame will come, right? Like you are a want, like people see this as giving people a free pass, right? But like when folks deconstruct,
Oh,
they
yeah.
will understand the damage that they caused, right? Like the way that you understand now the damage that you caused. And then they will be able to do something with that, right? Like, and what they do is up to them. But getting people to deconstruct is the work that we have to do because it's not until they deconstruct that they can actually realize the damage and the harm and even make those apologies. We think that people are going to wake up and be like, oh, I'm so glad I'm out of that. Oh, thank you. You know, they're going to be devastated. They're going to be lost. People are in that kind of cult daze, can be for years sometimes after they come out of cults because they don't know, you know, what to do and what to focus on next. You ask for some actual advice. It's like getting people to figure out like what did they like to do before, right? Cults take all your time. And if you're born and raised in it, it's like, what do you like to do? What do you like to
Interesting.
do with your time?
You Mormon.
Mormon ladies, your house doesn't have to be as clean as you think it does. You know, what would you do with all that time? Right. And
But the hardest part is then to make the mission yourself. Someone
yeah,
commented that just a few minutes ago, and then you've had the mission, and the mission is building the kingdom, whether that's the American kingdom or the Army kingdom or the Mormon kingdom, children of
yeah,
God. When you've been
yeah.
kingdom building your whole entire life, and now you no longer have that mission, I think that's such a profound statement.
And
It's
this is what I want to say about this. It's like you can make the mission yourself, and it doesn't have to be changing yourself.
yeah.
It can just be
Mhm.
understanding who you are. And this is where I connect to the guide guru thing again, right? Like a lot of us go, okay, well, that guy fooled me, but like, who is going to be my guide? But I
And
think
we're
getting
dying
people to
with the guy.
understand that you don't need a person to guide you. You are the captain of your own life. You can decide what your values are. You can decide what you want to do with your life. Like that
You're
person that
Catholic
you were
guidance
listening to
only.
before, they were lying to you, right? They had no control over your path. Like going back to understanding, like, what do I want? What do I want? What did I used to do with my time? One of the things people would report about QAnon when it all fell apart for them is they were like, what do I do with myself now?